Dr. Theophilus Ekechi is a former Director Planning and Monitoring for the APC Presidential Campaign Council. Honorable Bamidele Salam is a member of the PDP. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on today. Dr. Ekechi, let me start with you. There are many questions concerning governance as to what's going on. Why does it appear as though we don't have a handle on this? Why can't we handle some of these things? Why does it appear as though we are overwhelmed? Where is this headed? Such questions on the lips of many who are just watching the events. From your perspective, do you think that your party has a hand on what's going on? Because it doesn't appear from such people as they do.
Well, I'm sure you must have been asked, you must have asked that question, bearing in mind too, that so many issues are cropping up that are the front burner in the nation today, particularly, of course, given the tapes you have just played, the issue of NDDC and what I may call the debates that have been going on there, and the revelations that have been coming out from NDDC. And most people have been very quick to begin to blame the president for not taking action. And I've always been so surprised and so worried when you say the president is not taking action. Taking action in what direction? Is it to stop the revelations that have been coming out from NDDC from taking place, or to stop the revelations that have been coming out even from EFCC from taking place, the investigation of Magu from taking place? If we agree that this president came into power on the mantra of fighting corruption, for instance, and came also into power against some suspicion that he was going to be high-handed and going to be a dictator, having been a former military head of state, you will now appreciate the other extreme. You should have concern for the other extreme from which people seem to be criticizing the same president. I want to say that from my own perspective, that what is playing out in NDDC, for me, is actually democracy in place, and is actually a very good manifestation of the commitment to fighting corruption in this country. In all the drama have been playing out, nobody seems to be giving credit, for instance, to the acting MD, who had all the opportunity to spend the billions and billions of naira that is available in NDDC, but who chose the other course to resist any influence to do those things that are not supposed to be consistent with the anti-corruption mantra. People don't even want to look at her pedigree and see that this is a woman who is an anti-corruption crusader, who, if you like, call him a Buhari ideologist, call him a Buhari diehard. He led the revelations, and in doing this, he did this at the risk of the job that he's having in NDDC. Nobody seems to be talking about that. We have always acknowledged that when you fight corruption, corruption has a way of turning back to fight back. And that's what has played out. That the president kept quiet is also supposed to be in his own to his own credit.
Okay, all right, just hold on a bit.
Also have directed the woman.
Hold on a moment. Let Honorable Salam also respond. Let's get his opening perspective. Honorable Salam, tell us, I mean, the National Assembly did come with that resolution, Senate being the latest, concurring with the House of Reps previously about security, but several other matters, including that of the probe going on in the NDDC. We've seen the NSITF and how it just seems to be going back and forth. Is it your impression that all is well?
Well, thank you very much. I want to say that all that has happened, especially in the last few weeks, are effects of the great and very disturbing rot that we have had in the system. I do say very often that it's a general failure of the political class, to be very honest, in Nigeria, that to the effect that the same problems which we have identified in the last 20, 30 years are the same problems we are trying to confront, are the same problems that are getting worse by the day. But again, you know, my people, the Yoruba people of the Southwest, have a saying that, you know, what brings the fondest memories of the dead is the irresponsibility of the living. When the living does not act very well, people tend to remember the dead. Now, today we have a government that came into power, like my brother said, on the mantra of anti-corruption, trying to fight security and fix the economy. Those are the three major pillars upon which the Buhari administration came into office. Unfortunately, if you look at all the indices in the last 5 years, everything has gone down. you talk about security. There was a time in this country, just about 2 years into office of the Buhari administration, when the spokesman of the government came on board to tell us that the Boko Haram had been technically defeated. Today we all know that that is a lie from the pit of hell. Boko Haram is still as vicious, as daring as it has been. In fact, just a few days ago, they had to carry out a public execution on the soil of Nigeria of 5 or 6 aid workers. A government that said it was coming in to combat corruption. And what you have today is the most disturbing of, cases of corruption. The principal, one which is the one affecting even the body that is saddled with the responsibility of fighting corruption. The EFCC, which was the creation of the PDP in the first instance, has never had it this bad. For you to have the head of that agency going through this kind of, scrutiny, and upon a report that had indicted him prima facie by the Attorney General of the Federation. And then, you come to the issue of the economy. There's nothing that has worked in the last 5 years economy-wise. You talk about unemployment that was at single digit in 2015, at about 9.1% 2015, is today 31%. Our debt to GDP ratio, which was 17% in 2014, is today 31%. You just name it. There is virtually nothing that is working, and it requires some degree of courage on the part of those who are saddled with the responsibility of managing the affairs of this country to admit that things are not working well. And that's why I want to give credit to the National Assembly, despite the fact that not minding the fact that I'm a member of that institution. The National Assembly has acted above party lines, above party consideration. Look at the concurrence of the Senate with the position of the House on the need for the service chief to step aside, carried without any form of dissenting voice, in spite of the fact that we had the majority of members, of those institutions from the APC. That institution has shown that Nigeria must come first in every consideration. This is not a time for any self.
There are a number of things that you have said.
It is a
just
time
one moment,
for us.
Honorable Salam. Just one moment. There's a number of things that you have said that I think would interest Dr. Ekechi. Well, part of the things that he has also mentioned is the fact that to a large extent, many people would expect that because the government of this present government, the government of APC, came up on 3 specific platforms, naturally, Nigerians would take government on primarily on those 3 platforms. And as far as he is concerned, security, we are not really doing very well in that regard, with all pockets of insecurity issues that are being raised, service chiefs that people are asking to step aside and all of that. Then we talk about corruption, which, of course, you have also alluded to. How do you respond to some of the things that you heard him say?
Well, I don't think we seem to have some. We don't have much disagreement based on my opening remarks and his own opening statements too, except for the fact that he tried to nail the fault to a particular party or the particular government in power. But let me still talk about corruption, which is actually very primary to the existence or to the popularity of APC and this present administration. Talked about EFCC. For me, it is a credit to this administration that the very body that was hitherto considered as untouchable, everybody had remarked in the past when Buhari insisted on Magu remaining in office, that Magu was a sacred cow. But the events of the last few weeks had demonstrated that the president does not actually entertain any sacred cow in his administration or in his philosophy of governance. The fact that a lot of revelations are going on now in EFCC, which are allegations that are subject to confirmation, means that there is no sacred cow. Means that even the president himself will submit himself for probe or investigation if the need arises.
Dr. Ekechi,
if we don't get to hear
Dr.
about
Ekechi, just one moment. A number of people would wonder what is the difference between your government and the previous government, because in the previous government, they had situations where the EFCC chairmen were removed in controversial circumstances. This is happening under this government as well. So what then is the difference, some might ask?
No, well, the difference, even if you look at the statistics of achievements, you can't deny the fact that within the 5 years that Magu had been in office, or within the 5 years of this administration, over 2,240 convictions have been achieved through EFCC. You can't deny the fact that about 980 billion naira, equivalent of almost a trillion naira, have been recovered. You can't deny the fact that assets have been recovered for corrupt politicians, corrupt leaders, from oil vessels, properties, shopping malls, schools. You can't also deny the fact that even the international community has acknowledged that the new EFCC has actually been fighting crime and corruption in this country. That is the difference, and that is quite a very major difference, if I may go forward to say that. But it is important for me to emphasize that the fact that the president have allowed this revelation to take place, the fact that it is the same department or another department within the same administration, according to what you just said now, that is actually indicting or attempting to indict the FCC, which is also under the same present administration, show that there's transparency in the fight against corruption. If we don't
Dr. Kichi, a number of people would agree with you in some things that you have said, but then some will also argue that all of the things that you have said may not have directly reflected on the lives and well-being of Nigerians. But let me take this to Honorable Salam. Honorable Salam, you said the other time that what's going on in Nigeria is a failure of the political class generally. Just what do you mean?
Well, please, can you please come up with that question? He wasn't allowing me to hear you well.
My apologies. He said the other time, you said that when you began your presentation, your opening remarks, you said, to a large extent, the issues we are having in governance reflect a failure of the political class. Just what do you mean?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me say that I believe very strongly that the purpose of leadership is to solve problems. Leadership is not a title, it's not in decoration, it's in having effect. And if you study the pattern of our governance system in Nigeria, even before this present republic, you will discover that we have been hovering around the same major issues: corruption, inefficiency in the public service, economic strangulation of major economic factors that determine the well-being of the people. In other words, if you ask yourself, in the last 40 years, what exactly is the problem that Nigeria has successfully tackled? The answer may come out negative. And of course, we have had leadership for all those years. Rather than having better situation of our electricity supply, for instance, it has been going down. This administration came on board promising that they were going to generate 40,000 megawatts. Today, we don't do up to 4,000 megawatts. A situation where Transparency International, which is the globally acclaimed body that rates countries as per the effort on anti-corruption, continues to downgrade Nigeria. The last grading of the Transparency International put Nigeria above only Guinea-Bissau in the whole of West Africa, as the second most corrupt country just in our own enclave, the West Africa. So what I'm saying is that we must all admit that there is a failure of leadership, because the major problems affecting the country, none of those major problems have been solved. Rather, we have been having a worsening of the situation. It's like one administration performing worse than its preceding administration. Now, that should call for worry for anyone who is in public office for the purpose of serving the people, for the purpose of solving problems, and more especially for a party that came on the mantra of change, selling to Nigerians the fact that they understood the problems, and they were ready to take Nigeria on a new and different course that will lead to providing solutions to these problems. Unfortunately, this government has performed abysmally poor, abysmally, in a very negative form in all the indices of development. And this is where, the worry should lie. Now, let me quickly respond to something that my friend said, talking about the fact that we had all this revelation is a credit to this government. I beg to disagree. These revelations, did not just come on now. You remember when the National Assembly under Saraki and Dogara were to confirmed the nomination of Mr. Magu, the Attorney General of the Federation and the Department of State Services wrote damning reports about this man, about that institution, submitted those reports to the National Assembly, upon which the National Assembly withheld assent to his confirmation. Unfortunately, the president, on whatever basis or whatever, whoever was advising him, decided to keep this man there. Perhaps if he had acted then in good conscience and acted on the report of his own department. The Attorney General's office is under the presidency, the DSS is under the presidency. Now that is the presidency indicting somebody that is nominated by the presidency for that office. If you had acted on it, I'm sure we'll not get to where we are today. What has happened to the EFCC has casted a very big light on the anti-corruption crusade of this administration.
Right, just hang on a minute. Dr. Kechi, concerning the power sector, I mean, when he says that the party promised 40,000 megawatts, but now we see that we're told to expect, is it 7 or 11,000 megawatts by 2021 and 2023. Isn't that shifting the goalpost in the middle of the game? Or better still, do you want to tell us what has changed in that sector?
Well, I think even to the ordinary observer, even to the ordinary layman, it is only fair to admit that in the past 5 years, the power generation capacity of this country has improved significantly. I am happy that while my friend here was talking about referring to 4,000 megawatts, you were also talking about a projected 11,000 to 13,000 megawatts by the year 2021 and beyond. Then you also consider the quantum of resources that is available to a government. You don't begin to talk about the achievement of a government without putting it in context to the resources available to that same government. What is the inflow of revenue? How has the limited resources available to a government been managed within the context of...
If you can hear me just a minute, are you suggesting then that the promise of 40,000 megawatts wasn't done with all the proper considerations when the party was pushing that promise?
The president and all those in government now, and even APC, have never claimed to be clairvoyant. They have never claimed to have the power of the future. They never predicted, for instance, that there's going to be coronavirus pandemic in 2020. They never predicted that oil revenue will fall as sharply as it did in the past 5 years. They never predicted that the politics, the international politics that affected the fall of oil revenue will have happened. So both projections were made on the basis of anticipated and expected revenue. And like I've always told Nigerians at every opportunity that I have, the information on which and the data on which APC predicated its anticipated performances were based on what was released, what was available by the government that was in power then. What were the indices, or what were the data released by the Office of National Statistics, the National Statistics Office? What were the data released by the Minister of Finance? Where were the data available to Nigerians by the Minister of National Planning? These were the indices on which projections and predictions were made as
Dr. Kechi, just hang on. Let's get him to respond before we wrap up, even though I'm not sure if you're referring to the Lemmy report or something else. But Honorable Salam, could you respond as we wind down?
That, my brother representing the APC is trying to revise the manifesto. You don't need the power of clairvoyance to make projections. You only need to be honest and to be detailed. Now, the whole volume of the manifesto of the APC that was presented to Nigerians is, with due apology to whoever wrote it, a piece of fraudulent, manipulative promises. It is obvious that they never intended in the first instance to tackle any of the problem. Because if you remember, at various points in time, the party itself, through its various functionaries, came out to deny specific provisions. For example, the issue of promise to create 3 million jobs every year. There were billboards everywhere to bring down the price of petroleum product to 40 naira per liter. They produced banners and hosted them everywhere. Yet you have principal players in this government coming out to denounce that same document. Now, that is so unfortunate. I want to say that whatever covenant a politician enters into with the public has become what it is, a covenant. And if for any reason you are not able to meet up to the expectations of the people, you own up to it and allow others to try their hand on the handle of government. That is the most honorable thing to do. I don't think this idea of coming back and forth, and trying to give excuses is...
We thank you both for talking to us this morning. Honorable Bamidele Salam, member of the PDP, and Dr. Theo Ekechi, former Director of Planning for the APC Presidential Campaign Council.